still an early morning for you in the East right now?
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock. I'd say it's early.
Yeah,
So
it's early. I mean, earlier than we usually would record, but I gotta photograph tennis today. Gonna be a very good morning, hopefully. I recently just came across the National Film Registry lineup for the year. A lot of good picks, honestly.
yeah, that came out shortly, not shortly after, but I think the same week we recorded the first episode, so we're a little bit late on this. As well as the announcement of the entries because these typically come out end of the calendar year, but they pushed it back. I think because of the government shutdown, from what I've been told. So the entries came out a bit late, and it's for 2025, and we should probably explain what this is. The film registry
Yeah.
through the National Film Preservation Board, and basically they induct 25 films every year that are culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And it's been around since I think like the late 80s. More often than not, these are highly acclaimed films, but I look forward to seeing them just because like, oh, what is deemed important by our nation to be preserved in the Library of Congress. So yeah, there's 25 films. I don't know if we want to list every single one of them.
I think we could just like tap on them a little bit. I mean, I think a big one that got in was John Carpenter's The Thing. That film has a
Yeah.
pretty unique stamp on horror film culture and of course sci-fi. I'm the sci-fi genre as well. So I'm very happy to see that's in there.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that these nomination or the inductees, they are user nominated. So actually, I think right now you can go and nominate titles for the 2026 inductees because they typically announce you have like a deadline. I think sometime in August to announce to put in stuff. So these are all user based, and a lot of them this year were a lot of titles that have been highly requested for a long time. The Thing was one of them, and The Truman Show is another one where people have been nominating these for years at this point, and then they're finally getting in. I don't know what the if it's like a weighted ballot or what exactly is the case, if they actually read through and consider them for their artistic or cultural merit, or if it's just a numbers game. But it is nice to see. I will say this year though, it's very much skewed more towards mainstream, semi-contemporary films, 80s onwards, where a lot of previous years they were a bit more niche.
I think it's a lot of films that have pretty much impacted the culture in some way, especially in the 90s selections. Like, I'm very happy to see that Richard Linklater's Before Sunrise is in there.
Yeah,
That means it's probably a lot of hopes for Before Sunset and what's the other one? Before Sunset and then
Before Midnight.
Before Midnight get in. And so that's really awesome. Really happy that The Incredibles from 2004 got in. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I think because in a sense, like despite the age on the animation a little bit, the film holds up extremely well for this era, and I'm very happy to see like a lot of those early Pixar films getting in the film registry, and of course you can't forget about Inception either. So
yeah, that was one a lot of people wanted. Yeah, Incredibles being in there is pretty interesting because I always thought if there was a Pixar film to get in before Incredibles, it would be Finding Nemo or even one of the Toy Story sequels. But I understand why Incredibles is in there. It makes total sense.
you know,
And yeah, the most recent one is the Grand Budapest Hotel, which is a really interesting pick.
I'm actually pretty happy it got it. And I think to me that's Wes Anderson's best film. I'm very happy with this whole list. I mean, it is interesting to see the Karate Kid in there, but and even if it's like not a perfect film, I do think it does encapsulate the 1980s time period pretty well. I mean, nobody can forget like those montages. So it's a very culturally impactful film, at least for that era. So
Yeah, I definitely understand why it's there. It is rather amusing to me that there's literally not a single film from 1927 to 1953, nor 1957 to 1980. Like they just totally bypass the 60s and 70s, where there are still a lot of films from those decades that are not preserved that probably should be. Off the top of my head, I know Barry Lyndon isn't in the collection or not
mm,
collection, the registry as of now, which is pretty insane. And going up to the 90s, now everyone wants Boogie Nights to be in the Registry, and it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah,
So
yeah. There's a lot of films that are that could potentially make it in. Isn't Barry Lyndon technically a British production, or is that also technically like an American production? Because don't
I
they?
think it's a co-production.
Okay, so yeah, so it still could technically get in.
I know they're a bit stingy in terms of what's considered an American production. I think it's predominantly if it's a co-production between another country, it's like okay, if there's some American funding, it counts. So I know I know like Lawrence of Arabia is definitely in this Registry, even though I think that might be more British funding,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
and push
But
more British people behind it. David Lean, of course. But yeah, it's it's a good list. I'm pretty
mhm.
happy with it. Any other thoughts on it?
No, I mean it's just a neat little thing. I don't know how many people necessarily look forward to this every year, but I don't know. I find it amusing, and also it highlights a lot of films where I haven't even seen or heard of, and it's like, well, now I need to seek this out in some way. So put a bunch of these on the watch list, watch in 30 years or something.
Yeah, and also you can understand the importance of preservation either. Just because film preservation is important. I mean, obviously there's a lot of fight on preservation right now, and especially due to like the lack of physical media out there in the world. So I think having many of these historic films that have impacted the American culture in some way is rather important. So it's great to see that the film registry continues to come out with some pretty great picks.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's important.
So we're gonna jump into some films. Some new releases came out recently. One of them we're going to talk about right now is the new Charlie XCX sort of documentary, mockumentary drama film, The Moment. This is sort of a satirical, a quote unquote satirical approach to the Brat phenomenon of last year, which is, of course, one of Charlie XCX's biggest albums probably the past century. I don't think there was ever an album that encapsulated the culture last year as much as Brat did.
Probably not. No.
Yeah. But before we jump in, I guess I want to ask you, because I mean, I know what my opinions on Charlie XCX are. What is your experience with Charlie XCX's music?
So I have a bit of an interesting history. It's more just because I've heard so much of her music without realizing it was her. So like I even going back all the way to like the mid 2010s, I remember when I Love It came out and that was just playing everywhere. I didn't realize that she was in part of that song until much later in my life. So I'm not necessarily a Charlie XCX stan, but when Brat came out and that was a huge sensation, I gave it a listen and I was really impressed. I really like that album. I think it's a very, you could tell it's very personal, but also very artistically driven. And I don't know, I do just like sort of the countercultural vibe and aesthetic that, and art or aura, I guess, that album brings. And it's very unique. And also, too, it's just, they're well written songs and they're catchy. So, yeah, for that reason, I guess Brat was my introduction to Charlie XCX, and while I still haven't gone back to listen to a lot of her older catalog, I'm looking forward to see what she does next. I remember when this film got announced, and I was thinking, okay, this is interesting, an interesting direction for her to go down because clearly this album Brat propelled Charlie to a mainstream status that we're now just seeing to start because not only with this film, but she's going to be doing the soundtrack for the upcoming Wuthering Heights movie. She has more acting roles now, all starting to trickle out this year based on the timeline of how long things take to get produced. And so I just remember hearing about this. I think the first time I heard about it was funny enough on Charlie XCX's Letterboxd because she was logging the assembly cuts of this film on there. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I wonder what this is. And then I heard it's like a mockumentary. And then it got me thinking, oh, this is going to be like this generation's This Is Spinal Tap. It's going to be kind of self aware and all that. So I went in and I was I was interested, basically. I was interested to see what she would cook up, and I I feel a bit mixed on it. I'm trying to like kind of remember stuff because it's been a while since I've seen it, but my I think it comes from a good place. It is a vanity project, and in that regard, with that label, it could have been a lot worse because last year we had the wonderful magnum opus called Hurry Up Tomorrow, which shows that The Weeknd should stay far away from acting. He should never act ever again.
No,
But
stop.
yeah, embarrassing, like actually an embarrassing film. The moment isn't that. It's not embarrassing. It's very much competent, but at the same time, I don't think I really enjoyed it. And I think my problem with the moment is that it really only works if you are a true fan of Charlie XCX. You are familiar with the Brat Summer, and it has zero staying power. I think that's kind of my big issue with the film is that it does capture 2024 very well because there's a lot of in jokes and references to celebrities and also just sort of the idea that once you have a major success, you're sort of you feel more locked and trapped. And in a way, this film parallels, I guess, what Charlie XCX experienced in real life. Sort of the fact that it's like, okay, I made this album, and now I am being offered all these other gigs, but it's like now my identity is sort of being taken over by the mainstream press. And that's an interesting angle to take, but I just don't like the execution of the film because I just don't think it's that interesting a project. Like the narrative is doesn't go really anywhere. It's sort of a comedy, but I didn't find it very funny. I guess that was another issue. And also it just I don't know, maybe you disagree, but I just don't think this film has any staying power. Like it only works for that one time you see it opening weekend, and other than that I don't think there's any longevity to this project. It's just okay, you're capturing this moment, and that's really it. And we'll probably get more into this in like spoilers, but this is definitely supposed to signify the end of the Brat Summer era, which is kind of interesting to make it into this narrative film piece. But I don't know, you could have just explained the whole thesis within an Instagram post. I don't think you needed how much did this cost? This is like a $5 million A24 film. I don't think you needed to do all this to just say, yeah, I'm moving on, sort of. So, yeah, kind of an interesting film. Like, I don't hate it, but it's not great either.
I've probably been following Charlie XCX for the past 10 years or so, oddly enough. Because the thing about her, and this is, I am a music head in some sense. Just I don't know if you like noticed in the film, but you probably saw a certain bald-headed Connecticut man wearing glasses named Anthony Fantano.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
Yep,
noticed
yep.
that.
Obviously, throughout high school, I used to watch a lot of Fantano's reviews, and I still do. I mean, even if like he's pretty outspoken in some areas, I think he's a pretty influential guy in that regard. And he sort of led me into like listening to more of Charlie XCX's music because despite those albums not being quite as impactful that was, they're still really good albums. I really enjoy Sucker, and I really enjoyed How I'm Feeling Now, which was the album that released during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think I had that on rotation a lot during that summer. And, of course, that's where Party for You released a music video this year for
Mhm.
it, despite the fact that the song's like 5 years old. And, her music, like, in a case, it's like a mixture of hyper pop and dream pop in some sense, but it sort of has this personal edge to it where it's like under all these masquerading sounds and high pitched noises, there's obviously a deep personal relatability with what Charlie XCX is saying. And yeah, I mean, she's a great artist. I'm glad that she got more attention when Brat came out because I feel like this is an artist that should have been impacting the mainstream for quite some time. I mean, she should have, but of course, she was overshadowed by a lot of big names in the industry and a lot of newer names. I mean, mainly Taylor Swift. Obviously,
Mhm.
has overshadowed her music in some way, and of course, you got some others like Beyonce is still doing her thing, and some newcomers like Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodrigo are. doing the same thing as well. So she's always been sort of under the radar, where it's like she's successful enough, but not quite to the level of success that the those other female artists have been. And I was really impressed that Brat was such a good album, and it's still one of my favorite albums. I mean, I'm hoping to get that on vinyl pretty soon. Safe to say, I was pretty excited for the moment, and I sort of do like self-reflexive vanity projects in some way, and if they're done well, obviously don't do what the Weekend did last year with Hurry Up Tomorrow. I do sort of like the idea of like an artist sort of looking back at all the hype around a certain project that somehow managed to impact the culture in such a way that you kind of are put in a really tough spot, like after it's all done. And so I was very interested, and for like the first hour or so I would say it was working well enough, but then in its last hour it completely gets derailed. And I think part of it is that I don't think the mockumentary approach quite works. I think the documentary
Yeah.
approach works, but I couldn't see why this was painted as a mockumentary because it didn't feel like one. And you can say, like, maybe it's doing something against the norm, but when it was just doing the normal documentary stuff, although I think what does kill it too is like they do like address that they're making a documentary in the film. But I think a documentary approach, at least in this way, does help, like, ground the characters and the world a little bit. And, for a moment, it was like, it was looking like it was going to be that way. Then after that, it's just like, it starts to go down some really absurd and derivative plot and story beats that really kill the film. And there's very effective things here. And like I said, the whole concept and idea of like an artist sort of coping with the idea of like their biggest hit and wanting to like have it last for longer than like a few months, which why it's called the moment, because she's trying to hold on to that moment. Like there's a good concept there. And I think Charlie XCX, even though she is sort of playing in a version of herself, does give a relatively solid performance, but it's just like the rest of the film just felt super derailed by the time that second hour comes in, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, like I don't know what it wants to do, and I was completely lost.
Here's what I was thinking the entire time watching it is that what you're saying about sort of the derivative narrative beats of this film, would it have the same impact if, let's say, this film was entirely fictional? It wasn't about Charlie XCX, or it wasn't trying to capture a real life pop culture phenomenon. Would people have enjoyed it in the same way? Because obviously, the major pull for this film is Charlie.
Hmm.
It's obvious. But if this were entirely fictional, I don't think this would have the same impact or intrigue at all, because it really, when you break it down narratively, the film really doesn't say anything new. It only just it reflects on a I guess a cycle that a lot of pop icons or music icons go through, and it's not necessarily a bad thing if it's a real life experience. And I think you hit on something, is that I didn't think Charlie XCX actually was that bad in the film, which kind of was one of my concerns going in. I'm just like, okay, will she be a believable fictional version of herself? And I think she pulls it off way better than The Weeknd did, for example, because I still have like Vietnam flashbacks because of how awful that film was. But she gives a believable performance, but it's just the script is so weak and doesn't really do anything that new. And I do agree that the mockumentary format I don't think is achieved to the highest extent, because it doesn't. There's points where it acknowledges the camera, but then just kind of forgets that it's there. And then you have to wonder, okay, are they just doing it like this so that they can get specific angles, or like what is the real narrative inclusion of having the documentary crew? Because they don't really interact with the crew all that much. I think there's one scene when Charlie goes into her hotel room and then she sees the camera just like, you guys are recording again, like stop. Like that's like the one time I remember whenever they addressed the camera, if you filmed it like a standard film, it would have the same effect, I would argue.
And I think, like, this style of filmmaking has existed for a long time. I think it is
Hmm.
sort of just taking a giant, leap forward as recently. And I think a lot of that you could do to what's being shown on TV right now, or at least what's been shown on TV. I know you haven't watched it, but HBO's Succession sort of uses the same approach where it's very documentary like, and it's, feeling like, the camera should not be in the room at all. And it's a very effective use of that documentary style approach. Obviously, recently HBO's The Pit, the show showcasing the doctors inside of a Pittsburgh hospital, uses the same approach. But the thing is, it's like with those pieces of media, and there's probably many others too that use this
Hmm.
type of approach as well. There is at least an intent for why that approach is being used, and it's not to say that the moment doesn't have that intent to use it this way. Because obviously it wants to paint sort of like a grounded picture of Charlie XCX sort of coping with the idea of the brat phenomenon, potentially fading away. And for most part, I didn't mind like the fact that it looked cheap. I didn't mind that there was some
Oh,
shot.
I did. I'll get into that later, but
Yeah, like I didn't mind it looking cheap or looking like it was very unprofessional, because I hear it all the time in documentary. It's like it's the perfections and the imperfections, and and which is the truth. Like you want to, it actually feels raw, it feels grounded in such a way that it does sort of help propel the film a little bit. But I just don't know if the documentary crew needed to be addressed. It's a case where, you're already using this style, and, you probably don't need to bring in the documentary part of it at all. Because otherwise it kind of just feels like, oh, we're just doing this now, and, it's just not working. It just didn't mesh, and it felt soppily handled, and it's not like to say that there aren't good people working on this, but it's just like I think there should have been much more of a clarity for why this is there. And I think that's what also kills that as a mockumentary, because you can barely even tell it's a mockumentary. It kind of takes things very seriously, oddly enough.
first, before getting to the tone, I will address the overall production quality of the film. I don't think the film looks that great, even as a mockumentary. Like, it's cheap, and yeah, maybe that was the intent because documentaries don't have as much production value as narrative feature films, but it's one of those instances where when you see celebrity cameos in this film, you could tell like, oh, that's where the budget went to. Like when we have the brief scene with Kylie Jenner or Rachel Sennett, it's like, yeah, it probably went more towards there. And like, I don't know, just the color palette was so boring. It looked like a YouTube video at points. I will say I really liked the opening credits. It had kind of a Gaspar Noé Enter the Void style vibe to it. It was like a very club like and intense. But then I expected a different level of professionalism for some reason. I don't know why. But when you have the A24 brand associated with this, you'd expect it to look a little, I don't know. I thought it would just look a bit better. To me, it's like it didn't look all dissimilar to what you would see on YouTube. And then tone wise too, this is supposed to be satirical. It's supposed to be Charlie XCX reflecting on her own life experiences with trying to make this brat era extend more, and her dealing with sort of the complications of the fame. And they hint that kind of well with the director character, the Alexander Skarsgård role, who he's brought in to film a concert, the concert film for this brat tour. And then he just sort of wants to not tank it, but bring in all this input to make it more family friendly, almost turning Charlie into a Taylor Swift esque figure. Which that part isn't. It's not a bad idea in concept, but I don't know, the execution, they just went for the most obvious jokes and humor, and it didn't really land all that much. And I guess there is this irony to everything that's happening, but I just didn't find it funny. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it sucks when a film is trying to be funny and the comedy doesn't work, because you're just watching it. It's like these scenes are going on way too long. The jokes are largely repetitive too. and then it kind of just comes out of nowhere. Like you said you liked the first half, right? Is that what you
Uh,
said?
yeah, I liked the first half just because it seemed like it was doing the grounded approach pretty well for the most part. But I think
That's fair.
because I guess like do sort of like self-reflexivity in these type of films, and especially when it does sort of feel like it's honest in what it's doing. But I think once Charlie goes to Biza and Skarsgård takes over the production of the Brat show or whatever, it's like, yeah, it really, really loses steam. I mean,
Yeah,
like it just gets
it almost
more.
turns into a different movie almost.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't mind the whole idea of like, the Skarsgård character being involved because, obviously he's a director that is clearly not in tune with what Brad is about and he's trying to turn it all into like evergreen family friendly content. In some way, I think Charlie XCX mentioned at one point, I think it might have been in her recent Letterboxd on the film, which, thank God she didn't rate it herself. That would have
Mhm.
been very egotistic. But I think she stated that, this is sort of like an antithesis for what could have happened with Brad, where, labels and, corporations could have grabbed the content and completely turned it into something that it wasn't, just to appeal to the masses without. And there was a good conversation being had where it's like Skarsgård saying like something about like the lyrics in one of the songs and saying they should change it up, like this music needs to appeal to families. It's like, how
It
do
needs to
you
be less
expect?
offensive.
Yeah, it's like, how do you expect a song about cocaine to appeal to families? Like to me, that's kind of where the film already sort of like hit the nail on the head. It's like, yeah, they're obviously the artist and their art being transformed into something that it isn't. Which we've seen happen countless times to many artists out there, even filmmakers for that matter, that are sort of trying to turn their stuff into the most basic cookie cutter product imaginable. And that's a fear for a lot of creatives, is having their stuff become something of like a corporate product, just meant to appeal to the masses and be disposable in that way. It does hit the nail on the head with that, but then it's just like it kind of just gets super derailed with everything else going on, and it's just it just doesn't work after a while, and it's like it just kind of keeps hitting that nail on the head. It just gets infuriating after a while.
Yeah, what's frustrating is that like I don't necessarily think the messages are that bad. I wish they just expressed it in a way that was more unique because what you're saying about like Amazon, which admittedly that's not that bad. Amazon specifically coming in to make this concert film and them and Skarsgård trying to turn it into more family friendly, mainstream appeal. That's probably something that is reflected in a lot of artists, but I don't know, the execution of it, it was like it seemed like something out of The Simpsons, but without the wit. Like it wasn't funny, and I don't think the satire or the commentary was all that strong because it's not like it was saying really anything that new. Like seeing her Charlie in sort of the more popified version of herself is very much okay. This could have happened, but it didn't happen in our reality. But also, I just don't. It felt very obvious. Like I still don't understand why this film was necessarily made with this commentary so kind of surface level, and I don't know. I have really mixed feelings about how it handles the themes and ideas because you can tell they're coming from good places. It's not insincere. I just execution wise is so basic. I think is probably the best way.
There's been vanity projects like this before. I know there's like definitely been a few that are sort of, because it's been a while since you ever seen like a film that was based off an album that has been good. Obviously, the best one is Pink Floyd's The Wall, and it's just because Pink Floyd knew what they were doing. Roger Waters was heavily involved, and not to put it what's the name of the director of this film? It's
Oh, Hayden
Aiden
Zamiri.
Zamari.
I
Zamari.
has he done anything else?
It sounds like he's looks like he video director has worked with, a lot of people, like, apparently he's worked with, FK Twigs and, Caroline Polachek, who, great artists in their own right.
This is his first film.
Yeah, his first film, which, for a first film, it's not the worst thing ever, but I feel like that, their copy could have been in a little more clarity with the approach, because, the thing
Mhm.
about The Wall, it's like there was a clarity with an approach from everybody involved, and it was rather important when they made that film that, it was very true to the album itself, but also very true to what the artist's vision was, and obviously that's the album that, inevitably broke up Pink Floyd in the long run. I mean, they kicked, like, one of their band members got fired halfway through
Mhm.
the production of the album, so, not everything went according to plan with The Wall after the album's, like, whole run was finished, but, you could tell there was a clear intent with, like, what story was being told. And here it's like there is an intent. You can tell it's there, but it's just like the steps it's taking to get there aren't that fruitful. And it just kind of comes off really cliche and derivative, which, I know Charlie wrote the story, but I kind of felt like I wondered there was a way where, there could have been much more clarity here.
It also just felt the whole production felt rushed because like when in the grand scheme of things, Brat Summer happening only a year and a half ago and the movie just came out now. That is an insanely streamlined production from when who I don't know when they started filming, but I recall that the first rough cut that Charlie logged on Letterboxd was sometime last in the summer of 2025. So that's an insanely tight production schedule. And I honestly think if you maybe waited another year to sort of flesh out the ideas and maybe even more self-reflection, I think the film probably would have been a lot better because unfortunately it sort of goes to show that okay, this film was made just to sort of still capitalize on the trend of Brat Summer, which even for some people, I know people are making jokes like saying, girl, move on. It's been like a year and a half. So even now, some people are thinking it's too late, but I don't know. It just felt like that came first before actually making a film that might have some artistic staying power. And that's also what kind of frustrates me is that in that regard, the Vanity Project label really stands out where it's like, okay, this is really just made to keep the trend going, even though at the end when the concert film does come out, it's her coming to terms like, okay, this hyper mainstream, totally not my sort of vibe and style concert film is what kills the Brat era. And she's content with that, which I don't think it's not honestly not a bad ending to the film. But I don't know. It's like, did you really need to spend like $5 million to say that when you could have just I don't know maybe do like a short film or even if you wanted to make like some singles to sort of establish that like I don't understand why it necessitated this feature length film because once I come to terms with that I'm never going to see this again to think of it as a period piece. I just don't think the film has staying power. I don't know if you would agree with that, but
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's gonna be interesting because, I mean, I am probably have a little bit more of a bias when it comes to Charlie XCX is because, I do appreciate her music a lot and, you know,
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
yeah, and her personality. So it's like, I guess I'm a little more forgiving on what this film is trying to do. But I guess in the case, it's like I could just kind of see where things weren't thought all the way through. And you're not gonna really see many of these types of projects happen for a while. And the thing is, it's like I try to think about like if there were like any other good vanity projects, and obviously there is a certain controversial figure who I think has been successful in doing that. And yeah, I know he's recently apologized on a Wall Street Journal advertisement recently about all the stuff that he's been up to this year for the past few years, but and apologizing for all the stuff he's done. I think there is a good example of a vanity project out there, although I wouldn't say it's perfect, and that is Kanye's "My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy,"
Hmm.
where there was a short film attached to it. Where I wouldn't say it was a perfect short film. I do think it was very self-serious, and Kanye can't act at all. But there was at least a clarity on what he wanted to do with the project in some way, sort of like treating fame as like, this dying bird in some sense. And yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, there's a lot of crazy things that happen in that short film, which I don't even know if I'm going to mention on here. But there is a clarity with what he wanted to do, and obviously there's some other examples too, like Beyonce's Lemonade is also a good example of sort of a vanity project.
That's a really good film, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, really,
Everyone should
really
check it
good
out.
because Beyonce had clarity in what she wanted to do with it. And I wouldn't say that Charlie didn't have a clarity or intent because obviously her whole goal was just to let the brat phenomenon die so she could go do something else. Which, really what a lot of other artists have to deal with, like once their biggest hits come out and all of a sudden it's like they're always worried about like, maintaining that momentum going into the next project. I mean, I think there's only probably a small handful of artists that have been able to do that effectively. I mean, I think good example, Kendrick Lamar. I mean, every album that guy has released has been 8 out of 10 or higher. Like because he has kept it consistent, and he obviously coped with it in like his second to
Mhm.
most recent album. And so there is an idea there that could potentially work in a film, and it has worked. Like I said, with Kanye and Beyonce's projects, but and we'll see what if Kendrick decides to do anything. But I don't know. Just I feel like it should have just had a little more clarity in what it wanted to do.
As much depth as this concept had, it should have been shorter. Honestly, I don't think they should have extended this to a feature film just because it seemed like a bit of a hodgepodge of ideas. Like the first, it almost seems like you could split the film in two, and independently they could stand on their own as probably solid films. But when you combine them together, it just seems very unfocused and unsatisfying. Do you have much else to add? Because I think I don't really have much else to say. It's not terrible. Like I know I sound more critical about it. I just think there's a lot of missed potential because you can see talent, you can see passion in this film, but it was executed in very standard ways that I didn't find very satisfying at all. Honestly, like when I watched it, I was like, okay, that was a film. That was a film that came out. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to give ratings or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think initially it gives us like probably a 5 out of 10 because I do think there's a lot of things that can work with this, and it's like there are certainly effective moments in the film, but I think it just should have had a little bit much more of a clear intent from the get go because I think the documentary approach can work, but trying to call this a mockumentary just didn't feel that way. I mean, just some moments, like after the whole fallout where Fantano drops his score on Brat from a 10 to a 3 was sort of funny in some respects, but that was only for a few seconds. But I feel like that if there was a clear intent from the get go and a clear idea of what it wanted to do, I think the film could have, it would have been better. But I think, falling into these derivative cliches we've seen many times before, and, I think just sort of the lack of, intent really does kill this film at the end of the day. And so I think 5 out of 10 is probably where I stand.
I'm a bit lower. I give it a 4 out of 10. There's some redeeming elements, and like I said, it's a vanity project that comes from a good place. Like I don't think Charlie's goal was necessarily to make money, but what she and ultimately ended up saying could have been expressed in a far more, I guess, quote, cheaper, less expensive route where you didn't have to spend all this money. We didn't have to spend money to see it. You could have uploaded this onto social media and given the same, I guess, statement about how the Brat era is officially done. That being said, it wasn't all terrible. Like I said, she does a good job in it. Of course, the soundtrack is good, but otherwise, I don't. I'm never gonna see it again. So, yeah, 4 out of 10.
Brad is still a 10 out of 10 album, though.
I
Yeah.
Yeah, no less than a 9,
Yeah.
I would say. Also the remix album is pretty good too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
do like that.
Yeah. And I really especially like girl, it's so confusing with Lord being featured is great as well, and Guess with Billie Eilish is also really good. So yeah, I mean, it was a good phenomenon. I loved it. Um,
Yeah, I'd rather have that than the era's phenomenons. So,
yeah, you might have pissed off my younger sister that way.
oh,
She's
I'm sorry.
I know she's a big fan of Taylor Swift, but I mean, I don't love her, hate Taylor Swift, but you know, it is what it is. So now we're gonna jump into another recent film that came out. Actually, came out about 2 weeks ago, but I think it's still at least worth talking about, and that is Send Help, directed by Sam Raimi, starring both Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. It's about a boss and his coworker, who played by Rachel McAdams, the boss played by Dylan O'Brien, who both get stranded on a deserted island off the coast of Thailand, I believe.
I think
Um,
so. Yeah.
yeah, and sort of all the deranged Sam Raimi level stuff that happens on that island. I guess before we jump in, what do you think of Sam Raimi?
I like Sam Raimi. I haven't seen all of his films, but from the ones I've seen, I think they're a lot of fun. And he's a filmmaker that has a personality and style, which I really appreciate. For the most part, when you watch a Sam Raimi film, you could tell he was behind it. It's actually interesting. Red Letter Media, they just came out with the first part of their ranking every Sam Raimi film video, and I started watching that, and I realized, oh yeah, there's some films where he was basically a director for hire, and his style is nowhere near it. But otherwise, like Evil Dead films, super fun, the best type of schlock horror, and then the Spider-Man trilogy is also really solid. Even Spider-Man 3, which I don't think is a good film, has the Sam Raimi voice, even though he basically that turned him off from doing Spider-Man 4. But he's most successful with horror, and Send Help is the first horror film he directed since Drag Me to Hell in 2010, I
Mhm.
think, which I still haven't seen, but I heard it's quite good.
Oh, it's awesome.
So yeah, for that reason, it's like okay, I'm looking forward to this because I in the trailers they looked fun. It looked like it would be a good time, and yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was a good time. I really enjoyed it. It was not not the greatest horror film of all time, but it's clearly not trying to be. And that's what I like about Sam Raimi is that he's the furthest thing from pretentious. He doesn't try to make the greatest art film ever. He just wants to have fun with the camera and fun with the actors and tell a fun story. And that's essentially what you get with this. It is a very familiar premise, done very well. And I think it's funny that we just after talking about the moment how that was a familiar premise not executed in an entertaining way. This one, I think, it's more aware of what it is and kind of runs with it. I think it also helps that the two leads, Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien, they are excellent. Like I really believe their characters. I love how sort of the power dynamics shift from location to location and how this sort of descent into madness is ultimately changing them both for better and for worse. And it was refreshing that looking back at the trailers too, the trailers did actually keep a lot of stuff guarded. So watching it, there were some genuine surprises along the way. And while I think there are some points where it kind of stumbles narratively, I do think the film is a bit long, but and it seems a little repetitive more in the second act. But other than that, it's like okay, no, it shows that Sam Raimi he's still able to maintain his status as this uber stylized, fun fun horror director, and yeah, he still has it. He still got it.
Yeah, I mean, I like Sam Raimi too. The Evil Dead trilogy is obviously amazing, and the Spider-Man trilogy, even like with as many issues as like third film have, I think are very awesome superhero films, and especially like impactful for the 2000s. And yeah, I saw Drag Me to Hell. I really enjoy it, because I think it's good camp horror, in some way, and just fun all around watching that film. So I was really excited to see Send Help just because I do like Sam Raimi and I do like the actors in it. I mean, Rachel McAdams, is incredible in the film, and she's quite amazing. And I never thought too much about Dylan O'Brien, who, all I know is like Maze Runner, which, another young adult film that a lot of actors have started out with. But, so I mean, I liked their performances in the film, but I just couldn't help that, despite the film being entertaining, I just didn't feel that satisfied with it. I felt very mixed on it.
Oh, really?
Um,
Huh.
and and there were certainly fun moments for sure, but I felt like Raimi's direction felt rather reserved, compared to the other films he's directed. Which doesn't mean it's bad direction. I mean, he certainly still has his motifs and sense of style across the film, but I didn't feel like it was quite on the level of like his other stuff. And I it's like it felt oddly reserved. That doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, I think if anything, it's still an entertaining film, and it still does have a lot of good moments. But I felt like it could have gone a little further with this concept and these ideas. And I don't know, it just didn't really gel with me in the way that his other films usually do.
Yeah, we should probably specify that Raimi didn't write this film. He only directed it. I mean, he was a producer, and a lot of the same people that he's worked with were involved. Like Danny Elfman does the score, and
Mhm.
I think his cinematographer is also did this one. And yeah, there are Sam Raimi hallmarks, but I agree. This is not as extreme or overt as Evil Dead, but in a way, I kind of appreciated that it was a little more reserved, oddly enough, because even though Sam Raimi, I feel like he's one of those directors where he, as much of a personality that he has, he also tries to prove that, like, hey, I can do normal films too, which is what the Red Letter Media video hinted at. Like, there was this part of his career in the like the late '90s, pre Spider-Man, where he was trying to establish himself as like, no, I can make serious movies, I can make dramas that don't have the supernatural, like The Gift or For the Love of the Game, that era. And this film, Send Help, is almost sort of a blend of the two, but leans more towards the wacky side, because the parts where what's it when the horror and the violence happens, that's pure Sam Raimi. Like the kills are just ridiculous
Oh,
and they're
yeah.
really awesome. But I don't know, there is just this sort of humor to when Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien are interacting on the island, and sort of their, of course, when they first land, they're at the point where they both don't like each other, but then because of circumstances, they kind of draw closer for better and for worse. And also with the humor of it, with when it comes with the reveals and everything, there is this sort of self-aware slant to it that is hard to describe, but there you could tell there's a bit of fun with it, because the Rachel McAdams character she's very meek. She works hard, but also you could tell is a bit socially awkward, and she loves the show Survivor, and she's like a survival, I guess, enthusiast. And so when she's on the island, she's like, this is her paradise, basically, is her adapting to this desert island and learning to withstand the elements. And that, I think, really really works, is sort of the humor that comes from that. Like, it was like, this is, if God put her on this earth for a reason, it was to be on this desert island and survive. And a lot of the humor comes from that, and then Dylan O'Brien just being like miserable out of his mind. And I don't know, I just find that really really funny. And even though the middle act, I do think the middle act is the weakest part, just because it feels like, okay, it really hits a lull. But once the review, like the twists more in the third act come about, which may not be the most surprising, you could probably predict certain directions it goes. It's still really entertaining. I found it's one of the rare times where, like, yeah, it's predictable, but because of the tone and energy it establishes early on, I don't mind it. Like, I thought it was great. So
Yeah, and I think, there's certainly like a lot of great moments there. I mean, I think Rachel McAdams is, this is probably the most unhinged I've ever seen her in a role. Which, is
probably, yeah.
interesting because she probably hasn't, in the majority of films she's been in, she's always sort of just been the love interest in some way. I mean, maybe except for Spotlight, I don't know if there's really been any other films, but she's always sort of just been, the female lead in the romance movies that everybody knows, like The Notebook and uh, well, there was another one I forgot. It was with
About Time.
Domhnall Gleeson. This Is Our Time or something. Um,
Oh yeah.
but so it was nice to see her in a role where she can completely just go off the rails a little bit, and it was very fun to watch. And Donald O'Brien does a good job as well, and they both just work off each other very well, and it sort of does bring a neat role reversal. I mean, the thing that I do sort of like in the film is when she's on this island, she sort of becomes much more of a confident and more open person.
Hmm.
And looking more and more presentable than she was at the beginning, where she's obviously very closeted and isolated, and you know put into like these really rough workplace situations. But I just didn't really like, I think it's like it has these concepts of like, workplace abuse and trouble and some cases, and sort of showing like, how, obviously corporate dickheads don't give a shit. But, it sort of just doesn't explore it enough. Which, I don't think it does a film about being on a deserted island needs to explore those themes too heavily, but I kind of felt like that they could have done a lot more with that. And then I felt like they also could have done a lot more with the location as well, because although you can tell it's an intent to kind of keep them in one space for the majority of the movie, I didn't really feel like that this island was being explored that much. And I kind of wanted to see more of them going through this island and kind of encountering many more obstacles that can like change them in some way. Um,
I mean, I would argue there's a reason why they don't really explore the island all that much,
oh yeah,
which
yeah,
gets more into the ending. But
oh yeah,
no,
and
I see what you're saying.
yeah, and it's also like I guess I didn't get a good sense of space with this place either. I kind of
Mm.
wish there was a little bit more there, just to know like, okay, how are they getting from point A to point B, and like how far away are they from this one cliff that they're going to? And I just really felt like that, there could have been a better idea of like space on this island. And I don't know if it's like Raimi's fault, or because the script is not the greatest. Which you can
No,
be
yeah, it's
derivative.
it's not a Kaufman script,
Yeah,
but
definitely not. I feel like the script sort of does shortchange the film in the end, which doesn't necessarily mean like the effort that went into the filmmaking itself or the acting itself is bad. I mean, I think it's still relatively entertaining in that regard, and like I said, there's very fun gore scenes that gory scenes that happen in this film that are awesome, and just what we want to see from Sam Raimi. But I kind of felt like there could have been more stuff ironed out with this plot line, because there's sometimes where it kind of comes off a little bit odd.
yeah, if there was, I do think it's interesting that they get to the island really quickly.
Hmm.
Like there is not a lot of development in that, like in the office space, which I think maybe would have been better if they spent a little more time establishing the characters. I mean, I guess there really isn't that much to establish. Like you understand why Rachel McAdams wants the position just because of her work and how sort of the treatment of her in the office space is pretty. It doesn't really need much more explanation. Like it is concise, but maybe a little too concise. And I think it's more with the Dylan O'Brien character because it's clear that he's a nepo baby and he's just handed this position. And yeah, there's not really much else to say, but I don't know. We don't really get to know much about him compared to Rachel McAdams. I will say there was a. Did you catch the Bruce Campbell
Oh yeah,
cameo?
yeah, yeah. He's in
That
the
was
photo.
that was great.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that was awesome.
yes. So there's that, and I see what you're saying about the sense of space. Like they are on this one portion of the island, like the beach. That's fair. It would be nice if they explored a little more, but like we'll get into this later. But there is definitely a reason why. My problem, I think, actually, is the fact that I think on a production wise, the I don't really believe that they're on an island, which is kind of funny. Like there are when they're on the beach, that definitely seemed like it was on location. But when they're traveling on the cliffs or through the jungles, it very much screams Hollywood soundstage. It does not feel like a very believable environment. And even with the animal effects and the gore, like it's very cartoony, which I didn't have a problem with that because that's definitely a stylistic choice. But I just wish the environment felt a little more believable, which is a weird complaint, I know, but it was kind of taking me out. It's like there's parts with like the wind where it's like, okay, the wind is blowing, implying to be blowing, but it's not really reflected in like their hair blowing in a certain direction too. Yeah, and there were some parts where I like you mentioned how Rachel McAdams in this when she's on the island, she looks like I guess more presentable than she did in the Office Space, which is pretty funny. But and I was thinking like, okay, why does she look this good when they're all just on this island? Then later on, it's revealed, oh, that's why. So I think there is some clever, in a way, the complaints that you might have while watching it in the moment get sort of retconned and explained with the twist at the end, and it's like, okay, that's kind of clever. Like there was definitely some thought that went into the script and consideration, even though it's not the greatest thing of all time. But
Like, yeah, I didn't really mind the VFX too much on the animals, just because, for one,
no, neither did I.
it's Raimi's sort of shtick. He's not usually a guy that it's like visual effects in Sam Raimi films are not the most perfect thing most of the time. Although, but they more or less aim for camp. They more or less aim for just the creativity of this stuff. I mean, the Evil Dead films like still like are really impressive for the time, especially like this use of stop motion and the fact that they were on such a low budget and trying making these effects look this good. Although yeah, I'll bet a bit campy, really like helped make an identity for Sam Raimi in that franchise. And it is part of his identity to have the effects look that way. So I guess I didn't mind it too much, but I mean, yeah, there are certain parts that do scream like Hollywood soundstage at the end of the day, because it just doesn't feel like. Because if you want to make things believable, you probably should have found ways to make it, add a few more elements to really add into that value, add into that production value, and add into these spaces. Which is why the island just wasn't the most impressive thing. Didn't work in that regard. So I kind of do wish there could have been more there. Do you have anything else to say before we dive into spoilers?
I think one thing too is that, and I touched upon this briefly in the intro, is that I think the performances really sell the film and make the film work. Like
Hmm.
I think the two leads are very well cast, and I haven't really seen either of them in these roles probably either in a while or ever in their careers. So to see them take on a project like this added really showcase their talents because like I've always really liked Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. I've started to warm up to a lot more recently because like before when he was like in his Maze Runner era, I'm just like okay, he's just pretty boy actor number 10. Like I didn't really think he stood out, but like I don't know between this and the film Twinless from last year, which isn't a very good film, but he's honestly the best part. Dylan O'Brien, and it's like okay, he's really he's got talent here as an actor, and it's really playing to his strengths. And I think he sells the a hole corporate bro really well, and there's a lot of just entertainment from that, which is like how arrogant he is and how much he hates being deserted and he just wants to go back to his fiance. It's like there's humor in everything as well, and how insecure he is. So yeah, I guess spoilers from now on
Yeah, pretty
for
much
Send Help.
spoilers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And three, two,
So
one.
yeah, so the twist is revealed that um there well okay, there's like two twists, I guess. Which one should we start with first? I guess
Uh,
the first one is that Rachel McAdams sees like civilization or like sees people on a boat early on, but she decides not to call for help because she still wants to live out her survival fantasy. And then later on, Dylan O'Brien's fiance ends up finding her and like basically tries to bring her back, and then she ends up getting killed. Was she? I forget actually for some reason. Did Rachel McAdams actually murder her or did she slip?
No,
Because I know
not she murdered, like, she grabbed a rock and, like,
that's right.
threw it on top of,
Yeah.
like, the ship captain who was, like, helping her up the ledge.
Yeah, and that leads into more the predictable nature of the film structures. Like you know that the two are eventually gonna like, after they get along so well, like there's an instant where they're gonna like hate each other again, then like the more violence ensues. But then after they fight, Dylan O'Brien he's like running through the jungle, and then he finds out, wait, there's like a super rich like vacation home in the jungle, and that's like where all the resources are, which also explains how Rachel McAdams like gets all the food, and I guess by extension that's how she's able to like look so presentable with like the skin cream and all that, which is
Mhm.
that's really clever, honestly. And yeah, I guess spoilers for another film. There's a film from a few years ago called Triangle of Sadness, which also had a similar. That film wasn't all survival, but the last third of that movie is basically a deserted island survival film, and the twist of that was pretty similar, where they're on like a resort island. And so I was thinking about Triangle of Sadness for most of Send Help, except this one was a little more fun, even though Triangle of Sadness is a really good movie also. But I think the twist overall, even though it's like, okay, in the back of my head, I was thinking, is this going to be the reveal? Because there's also subtle commentary on like class disparity with like the wealthy elites running companies and sort of like the underpaid, overworked employees in cubicles. So the epilogue is sort of where I have a bit of issue with, where it's sort of like, oh, eat the rich before they eat you, but then you inevitably become part of that. So I'm like, I don't know if that necessarily worked, but the climax I thought was a lot of fun. So,
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really, like, loved the, climax, especially the part where Then O'Brien, like, sticks his, like, thumb right into Rachel
oh
McAdams'
yeah,
eye like that.
that was great.
It's a great effect. I mean, I guess I don't mind the twist. Like, I think it actually is a very clever twist and sort of presenting stuff, and especially like the you can kind of like interpret the scene at the waterfall where Rachel McAdams is like starting to like embrace like, this deserted island or whatever, or quote unquote deserted island. But you can sort of interpret it as like it's probably all in her head somewhere. So kind of showing that, she probably was never all there to begin with. I don't know. I guess it could have been built up a little bit better. I kind of felt like that, it didn't flow right into it the way I really wanted it to. Or at least,
That,
what the
that's
script
fair.
wanted. So I think it's just felt because it was fun. I mean, I do love the scene in the house and how it ends. Although I don't really like the how it transitioned into a few years later or a year later or whatever. But I don't necessarily. So I mean, there are certainly some fun moments, but I felt like it could have been built up a little bit better or flowed, or maybe just flowed right into that.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. It does feel a bit segmented by the last third. I don't know. I'm trying to think because okay, I think there's a part where near the middle, I thought when Dylan O'Brien tries to escape in that raft, I thought that was like near the end of the movie, but then we're like, oh, we still got like another 40 minutes left. Like, where's it going now? I guess that's kind of it was sort of catching you by surprise. Like, okay, if this isn't where the movie's gonna end, what's next? Sort of. Like, I
Mhm.
kind of I do appreciate that, even though it's not the best. It's not the best paced film, I would
Mhm.
say. I think in a perfect world, this could be cut down to about like a little over an hour and a half, and it would be probably basically perfectly paced. But
Mhm.
in a way, this is even though this is a horror film, there really isn't that much horror in it except for the last third. I would argue. Like there's a really out of place jump scare right before the climax starts, which I didn't really think was that necessary. But overall, it's more of a thriller.
Yeah, for sure, and it certainly has that identity. I think Sam Raimi. It's one thing he is good at is it is establishing an identity, just through his filmmaking and like he's always gonna sort of be like the one filmmaker that yeah, he's not gonna be like the award-winning filmmaker, which I think is what he attempted to do like in the late 90s before the Spider-Man trilogy existed. But it's somebody that embraces the style full-heartedly and is unafraid to sort of like be that guy in some cases. So yeah, it definitely purely establishes itself more as a thriller than I would say a horror film. But it still works.
It's nice to see him bounce back to this, even though there are flaws to it. It's definitely it's refreshing because this is the good type of January schlock that I wish more studio horror films would do. And in general, I just think January for studio horror was probably the best month in recent years because we had alongside this and The Bone Temple. It's like, wow, these were two solid films that are horror related and got audiences talking. Like, I don't know about you, but the audience that I saw Send Help with, like, they loved it. They were laughing. They cheered at certain parts too. Like, it was a great audience experience. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw it with like probably a small amount of people, but oddly enough, I think I texted you this, but there was a mom that brought her kid in with her. What?
oh yeah, I didn't get an update on that. Did the kid like it?
No, I think the kid fell asleep like through the climax, so he missed the best
Boo.
part of the movie where Dylan O'Brien's gouging Rachel McAdams' eye out. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I've seen worse. I saw a mother bring. I
I've
mean,
seen worse.
yeah, I saw a mother bring in a 3-year-old to see Wolf of Wall Street, which that is,
Mm.
probably not a film I would show to my kid at such a young age.
Yeah, probably not. Not the wisest idea.
Start him young, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, that could make or break that kid's future. Who knows?
He'll turn into Dylan O'Brien from Send Help, basically.
Yeah. Embrace the Jordan Belfort lifestyle. I hopefully he doesn't do anything. I don't know. I would like to see that kid down the road someday. Just like, oh, he was inspired by Screaming DiCaprio. We love it. Any other thoughts on Send Help at all?
No, it's just it's fun. Like it's fun. It's depending on the person you're with, it might be a good date movie, I guess. But I had a good time, and I maybe in a few years, like I could see myself just throwing it on, just to it's not one where you have to necessarily think too deep about it, but it's also at the same time, it's not insulting to your intelligence, if that makes sense. Like it's a popcorn film, and in that regard, I think it's really solid. I hope Sam Raimi still gets to make more horror films of this ilk, and yeah, I give it a 7 out of 10. I liked it.
I'd probably give it like maybe a light 6. Because I wouldn't say it's like I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it is entertaining, and Rachel McAdams and Donald Bryan still do a good job in their roles, and when the Raimi style does go outside the box a little bit, it is a lot of fun, but I don't know. I kind of felt like it just felt very reserved to me. Kind of wish there could have been much more there just from a presentation perspective. Which, I don't know if it was like, if Raimi was really put in a box with this film or if, this is what he exactly wanted to make. But, yeah, you could tell he didn't write the script. It's purely, you know, it's a purely different film. I mean, I don't like what people talk about Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness not really being a good film, but I could at least say with that, it's like I could see the Raimiisms working better in that film than I would say in this film. Although I would say
Mm.
that this is a better movie than that was.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But I don't know. At the end of the day, it's like it's pretty harmless, pretty inoffensive. I mean, I think people. I mean, it seems like people are still liking it. I might just be in the minority where it's like, I don't love it, but I don't hate it. So, but at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I still enjoy it. So yeah, light 6 out of 10. So all right, you had the first host recommendation. You got to introduce it.
Yeah, I'm I'm still surprised that you entrusted me with making the first recommendation for the podcast. Um, Having a lot of pressure, but I decided to recommend Fantasia, 1940 Disney film. It was directed by, geez, so many people because this is an anthology piece. A lot of Disney animators and directors were involved with, I guess, directing the sequences. And yeah, so probably right off the bat, I'll just say this is one of my favorite films, and I believe is this your number one?
Yeah, yeah, this is my number 1, and it's kinda funny, I was at a dinner a couple weeks ago. I was, celebrating my great uncle's anniversary, and, it was our waiter, Vegas, great guy. I was mentioning I was, like, a film buff, and it's like, "Oh, what's your favorite film?" And it's like, "Oh, Fantasia," and it's like, whole family, like, looks at me, it's like and then my uncle's in the background like, "So what, you think you have 20 films that are much better than Citizen Kane?" And it's like, "Yeah, I do." But yeah, this is my all-time favorite film. I think it's purely what I want in a film. And yeah, it doesn't have necessarily a plot or has a clear intent about what it is, and it's an experience. I mean, I even as I grow more apathetic toward the Disney brand, it's like this is a film that continues to impact me in a lot of ways, and has impacted my taste in music and has impacted my taste in filmmaking. Just like it's an immersion that this film creates, and yeah, this is my all-time favorite.
This is definitely in my top five. And to explain what Fantasia is for those that don't know, it's a collection of animated sequences corresponding with classical music. And this was the third Disney animated film, which, when you look at the chronology, this being his third feature represents an insanely confident direction for what could be done with animation, because before we had Snow White, then Pinocchio, and then Fantasia. And this is an extremely audacious experiment in terms of what could be done artistically with not only animation but with the film medium. And in that regard, I would say this is Disney's magnum opus. I think it is. I still can't believe he was able to make this, quite frankly. And even today, there's nothing like Fantasia, really. Of course, within the Disney brand, but also overall in animation, there's very few films that are like this, and it perfectly illustrates the power of what could be done artistically with the medium. It emotionally brings out a lot of out of me that really no film has ever done before, in terms of just capturing the brevity of the music and also the ingenuity of Disney's animators. It's enthralling, it's captivating, it's incredible. And I've been wanting to talk about this film for a while. I remember when we were doing Bijou Banter, it was always in my back pocket, like, oh, we it would be cool to talk about this one day, and we never did. So I figured this would be the best place to start. And it's a film where you could dissect each sequence, but also really deep dive into the production as a whole, because it has a fascinating production. So I don't. I'm trying to think of the best way to structure this discussion. Like, maybe we should just go down each of the sequences individually, and then we could. I wrote down a lot of notes. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I was
or
thinking we could sort of like dive a little bit into like the history of like how this not like
yeah,
too much, because obviously like when you someone reviews a film, but I think there is something we can sort of get context on about what made this film. So, before Snow White, animation wasn't necessary, the most I mean, it was a commercial art form in a sense, but not quite as like mainstream popular. People saw these as short films. At least in the American film industry, I know there's still arguments made about the print Tales of Prince Ahmed technically being the first animated feature film, but that was in Europe.
yeah,
At the time, like, animation wasn't a respected medium. And regardless of, like, what who Walt Disney is as a person, and, the stuff that, he's did at this time. Of course, the animator strike was a big deal around this time period as well. But it was more of a case where animation has never been put on this high of a pedestal before. And then,
mm,
Snow White came out, completely transformed the industry. But, Disney was still having a lot of middling struggles at the time. And like, especially with Pinocchio not bombing at the box office. Initially, how the film came about is that, Mickey Mouse wasn't quite as popular as the other characters were, so, like, Disney was like, "Yeah, let's make a Sorcerer's Apprentice," and, he managed to bring in Leopold Stokowski, who's, like, big name in the music sphere for that time period, and all of a sudden, the money kept building up for it. It's like, why don't we just make this into a 2-hour concert film? And that's what they did.
Mm.
And it wasn't super successful. And I think I was
No,
reading
yeah.
somewhere where I don't know if you know Tim Brayton on Letterboxd, but he sort of said that this was probably the last time Disney would ever go down this route of like independent art house film.
Yeah, I would very much agree.
And which sucks because, I think there could be potential for more films like this, but yeah, that is sort of like what made Fantasia, and, they brought in all the animators that they could and, created something pretty, like, imaginative, something that probably would never be seen in this, era of filmmaking. It's unlike anything else I've ever seen in probably
Yeah.
my entire life. It's insane.
Yeah, when we say like you could never make a film like this today, it's not in the context of like dated jokes or well, there are some dated stuff that was cut out that we could talk about,
Yeah.
but it's just the fact that it is artistically so bold and challenging for a film that was a part of the studio system. Like Walt Disney was very much ingrained with American culture, maybe not to the great extent as he would be later on towards the 50s, but still like we had the Mickey Mouse cartoons, we had the Silly Symphonies, and we had Snow White. Like he was the animator or the animation studio to beat, and this really showed the potential of what he could do. And part of the reason why this film didn't make a profit was I don't think it was just because of how artistically challenging it was, because it had a unique release schedule, but it was also because of World War II.
Mhm.
So, because of World War II, the film couldn't really be released in Europe, which is why later on Disney would pivot towards the South American market with the Three Caballeros and Saludos Amigos, and then they shifted to making war cartoons. So, because of that, this film was essentially ostracized from majority of the international market, which is why it didn't turn a profit. And this movie was very expensive, obviously, for the time, and because of it being so unique. It's also worth noting that from a technical standpoint, like one, the animation is astonishing. It's just insanely beautiful, but it was also groundbreaking for its use of sound.
Mhm.
It used the Fantasound process, which was an early precursor to modern surround sound. And because of how custom the tech was, you couldn't just the cost to put it in every theater in America just wasn't effective. So Fantasia was originally released in what we call the roadshow format, where it was similar to like later on in the 50s, the big CinemaScope VistaVision epics, where you had the program and the intermission, and it would be reserved seating. It was like going to a concert,
Mhm.
which the film very much is. It's an animated concert, like even down to the curtains opening at the beginning. It doesn't start with like the credits. It begins with the orchestra tuning their instruments, and Deems Taylor, the master of ceremonies, he comes out and introduces each of the segments. It carries a sense of weight and importance, but it doesn't feel pretentious, which is really I think that's probably the most impressive thing about this film is that I know some detractors saying like, yeah, this film's boring, like there's no plot and it's just pretentious, I guess, but I don't think so.
Mm.
I don't think the film is pretentious because it uses the medium in a way that's captivating, and in a way for younger audiences it acts as a gateway to critically thinking about music and art. And because I remember when I saw this as a kid, I don't remember necessarily loving it, but I found myself rewatching it every now and then. But then as I grew older, I'm just like, this really gets me to think about how does my mind interpret music when I listen to it? How does my mind interpret color interspersed with sound? It's really masterful in the grand scheme of things, and I just find it very impressive. And yeah, there's so much to talk about. Like I could just go on like an hour long like rant and quotes about why this film is so great. But I guess should we start with the segments and then
Uh,
just sort of go on? I think there's each one has some unique history
yeah, yeah, I
independently.
I believe
So
so. I mean, yeah, so, yeah, the for yeah, obviously opens with a toccata and fugue in D minor, which, very iconic piece of music. And I guess like the way it starts out is obviously it's not animated, but there's actually a pretty important name that I think does get overlooked, and it's not Stokowski, although like yes, they image is Stokowski standing up on top of the podium or whatever. It is a very iconic image. Like people know what you're talking about when you see that image of Stokowski just standing up there. But there is an important name that actually is responsible for the way that sequence is shot. And I think you might find this fascinating just because of your cultural identity, in some sense. But it was shot by a guy named James Wong Howe.
Yeah.
It was like,
Hmm.
probably one of the early people of color, and in this case he was Asian, who shot this sequence purely in silhouette. It looks so good. I mean, just the
Yeah, it
shadows and the
does.
color, the way they used the gels in it, and and this guy eventually won an Oscar, like, I forgot for what film, but his like shot creation is just incredible. Just using all these different types of like colors and shadows is just amazing, and how they're just sort of building on top of one another is just so fascinating. And then eventually it just jumps right into the abstract nature of the animation, sort of like syncing up with the music and how it's just sort of building up. It's like it's all these abstract thoughts that are just going and combining with the music being played. It's so amazing.
Yeah, and that was something that I've grown to really appreciate in terms of just the how much, I guess, clout Disney had at the time. Was that okay, even for the live action sequences, they're essentially just bookends for the animation. Like there's some supreme talent, of course, with Stokowski and Deems Taylor, but it, I just think I find it amazing that's like even just the shots of the orchestra was filmed in 3-strip Technicolor. Like this was 1940s, still like like obviously Wizard of Oz had been out at this point and Technicolor had been around for years, but most movies were in black and white still, and yet Disney was here just being like, yeah, we're gonna film just the orchestra in beautiful Technicolor. Like it's I don't know why like that little detail just fascinates me, and yeah, and going into Toccata and Fugue, it's the perfect introduction for this film, and the use of the abstract animation I always found incredibly fascinating just because this was seen as very contemporary and maybe not for some people they had never seen anything like this. It's worth noting that the sequence was inspired by the work of Oscar Fischinger, who is a very talented German abstract artist, and he was actually hired by Disney to be the director for the sequence, but because of the tension between his style and Disney inputting too much from like a corporate perspective, he ended up not going through with the project. But that influence is very much seen in the Toccata and Fugue sequence, the way the line work is done, and sort of how it plays with this idea of like, okay, this is what your mind might think of when you hear music. It's also worth noting that when Fantasia was later re-released, well, not re-released, but when it was out of the roadshow format, when it had the wide release in the 40s, they actually cut out the Toccata and Fugue sequence. I don't know if you knew this, but
That's weird.
because of how I think it's because of how abstract and more, I guess, quote, sophisticated it was for the mainstream crowd. They probably just didn't get it. Like it was, they hadn't seen anything like it. They expected something more like The Sorcerer's Apprentice or something like that. So, yeah, I've always loved the intro. I
Oh, yeah.
just, it's like a beautiful screensaver, and I mean that in the best way possible. And the music is iconic too. I think another great thing about the film is that they happened to choose the most timeless and having a lot of longevity with the pieces that they chose because there were a lot of other pieces in consideration, but you couldn't. The program is just perfect. Like it's excellent.
Oh
So
yeah, it's incredible. And the thing is, like, you could choose music for like anything, and and you could say it's like, oh, they probably just slapped it in there, just to make it match the animation. But it's not a matter of what the music they chose, but it's how it's orchestrated, which is why Stokowski is like such a big part of this film, because just the orchestrations and just the weight of like all the instruments, just and the way they sound is just so perfect. And it's like it's emotionally captivating in that way. It's like it doesn't feel like that, they're just putting it in there. It's just like they're actually letting it sink to the animation, but just letting it like, once the line dips, you just feel the weight drop, and then once it goes back up, and you feel it rise again. It's just like it is just so emotionally captivating. It's like really really messing with your heartstrings. And that's why Sikowski is like, such an important piece of this film because, it's one thing just to say he's just a conductor, but the thing about conductors, especially for orchestras and bands, is it's like they're the ones that are sort of leading the volume and up and the rise and fall and just being sure everything is going exactly the way it should be to ensure that you're feeling all this huge wind of emotion just coming right at you. And you could probably dive into like a lot of the music theory of this, which I admittedly am not an expert on it, even though I do listen to a lot of music. But it's just like how it's all done. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I do remember reading that much of the film did extremely well critically when it came out, but a lot of the negative reception came from music theorists. They didn't like Stokowski's rearrangement of the pieces, which I'm no music theorist, so I can't comment on that at all. I do want to point out before we move on to the other segments that the Fantasound, the original audio mix for the film, was restored in the 2000s, and a lot of stuff from Fantasia was cut out, and so even today it's not a fully restored film. There are some elements still missing. So Deems Taylor's audio is actually not his voice. He was redubbed by Corey Burton, who
Mhm.
is a Disney voice actor. So that audio was lost, and there's some disparate shots that are missing. They actually re-recorded Fantasia in the '80s with a Dolby Stereo mix because Ron Miller, uh, great, I'm being sarcastic, great Disney CEO, Ron Miller, he thought that the tracks from the '40s, they no longer sounded good or something. So
Mm.
they re-recorded it for the '80s re-release, and I don't know if you've ever listened to that, but it really does not sound good. So much of the weight and grit is lost from it. It sounds way more sensationalized, whereas in the original audio mix, it sounds more like you're actually in the concert hall, whereas you could tell with the re-recording it was recorded in a high quality studio. It doesn't have the same effect, and thankfully they restored it. But you can actually listen to the re-recorded tracks when they re-released the soundtrack a few years ago, and I recommend listening to it out of curiosity. But I'm just so glad that they didn't re-restore it.
Yeah,
So
for
yeah.
sure. And it's the authenticity of like that music, and film was an innovator in multi-track recording too for
Mhm.
filmmaking. I mean, people do underestimate like the impact of sound that Disney did bring to the mainstream in animation, and just sound in general. And so it was rather important on how this film did innovate in sound, even though although it is not the inventor of surround sound. It's like the
No, no, yeah,
yeah,
the
it's
pioneer.
like
It really pioneered.
yeah, it's a precursor to surround sound. So a little bit different that way. But yeah, I mean, it's great, and I'm glad that they managed to keep as much as they could from the original version. And that's kind of the beauty of the Disney archives. They care about restoring a lot of things, and so they're very hardworking people. So
They
uh,
care, but yet Fantasia still hasn't been released to 4K yet. Get on that, Disney, please.
yeah, please do it.
Yeah,
Nutcracker, sweet.
yeah, no,
Uh, Obviously a piece of music that the composer hated. um,
no.
so, but yeah, I mean, I really love it. I mean, especially Dance of the Flowers. I mean, I think that's where you feel like the true weight of
Mhm.
Fantasia. Is in that piece, especially just the way they use the strings in it, and feels so heavy just listening to that part. I mean, I love all the other parts too. I mean, just really beautiful animation with a lot of beautiful colors and in that way. And I know there's like parts of the Nutcracker that people can see as a little bit culturally dated.
Oh yeah, the Chinese
But
mushrooms.
yeah, the Chinese mushrooms and the Arabian dance, you still feel it's still great music in that regard. And like I said, the orchestration from Stokowski really add a lot to it.
Yeah,
So
this one feels very similar to the silly symphonies that Disney made, especially with the use of color. You could tell there's a lot of multi-plane camera in this film with a lot of the zooms, and I remember, I think it was on the bonus features for the Blu-ray of this film. They talked about the effects to animation, like the snowflakes at the end were like actually
Hmm.
mechanical, and they sort of like effectively superimposed the cell animated fairies on top of those spinning snowflakes. And it's like, it's super impressive from a technical standpoint, just sort of the way they were able to match that together. Really well done. I do like this rendition of the Nutcracker Suite. Also, just something about the way the chimes and the xylophones are in that opening really just stand out.
Probably the most authentic piece of media for the Nutcracker because I saw the ballet last Christmas and I was like, wow, I could see why so many of the film adaptations of the Nutcracker suck because really there's not much of a plot to the Nutcracker. So this is probably the most like you know true to the original ballet in some way. Although, like, yeah, it's animated and there's no Nutcracker in it. Nothing, like, you know what Theme Saver said, nothing left of him but the title. So it's like it's, but yeah, it's amazing. So
Sorcerer's Apprentice, next one,
yeah, so Richard
probably the
Apprentice,
most famous
the
one.
film, yeah, the most famous one, the one that actually started the whole project because, like I said, it initially started as like a Mickey Mouse short, and then all of a sudden, like the budget kept building up, so they just decided to make it into a full feature film. So, and yeah, I mean, it's a great sequence, very iconic. Obviously the most popular one. I mean, it's amazing animation. I especially love the part at the end where Mickey's on the book and you see the water swirling and it's just like it looks so
Mm-hmm.
abstract and like just the motion blur on the animation is just incredible here. It's just so
Yeah,
gorgeous.
this is the most narratively defined of all the segments, and I there's no dialogue, and I think that's what out of all the sequences, this one best excels at like communicating character without a single word. Just looking at the expressions of Mickey, you can sense the curiosity, the mischief, and sort of the intrigue that he has with the sorcerer hat, and even with just the way the broomsticks are animated and sort of the chaos that ensues. It's almost like a silent comedy in a way, just
Hmm.
how extravagant things like build up to. Even it's like little moments too, like when Mickey's on the book reading the spell, even though he's surrounded by water, he licks his thumb to turn the pages, which I think is a really cute gag. The least artistically challenging, but it's the most charming. And I do
Hmm.
really like that. And I love how the waves, when he's in the dream sequence, how the waves correspond with the symbols. It's also the first appearance of Mickey's new design, because before that it was the Pie Eye era. So this was his one where he had defined pupils. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a great design. I mean, they do really. I mean, I think it obviously like is a design that is still sort of used to this day. I know they went back to the pie eyes that they had in the newer Mickey Mouse shorts and in a way, but it's nice that this was sort of a good reintroduction to the character, especially with the fact that Walt Disney's biggest concern going in was just he wasn't quite as popular as like, Donald and Goofy were because and part of the reason is and it's just an issue with the character in general is that like he is so corporately protected and it's such a marketable image that you don't want to give this character that much of an edge because you want him to be family friendly in that way. Which mean, yeah, he freaking murders a broom
Yeah.
like in
That
this film.
that
So not necessarily family friendly.
Yeah, that scene when he murders the broom, that was originally fully animated, but they cut it. I guess it was just too intense. So, but even then, like when the shadows, when you see his silhouette and like sort of the striking lines, it does dive into the more abstract parts of this film. So you do see a combination of the classic Disney cartoon with the more artistically challenging and unique elements of Fantasia as a whole. So there's a bit of both.
Oh yeah. It's also, like, really good lighting effects too.
Yeah.
Like, I really like the lighting effects. I mean, no, if you have some sort of epilepsy or, sensitive to flashing strobing lights, I mean, probably watch this sequence with the lights on.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the lighting and how they use a lot of the lighting choices and, how once, like, all the broomsticks, like, start coming through the door, that it's just the light just freaking just blasts through that door. I mean, and especially like the parts where, Mickey's like peeking through the door and you just see the rays of light poking out. It's like, that is perfect. Like, just the way it's all orchestrated here is amazing. I mean, and yeah, it's the most iconic part of the film, and in that way, and obviously just because it contains a character that Disney is so synonymous with. I mean, you draw three circles, you know immediately like who that is and what company it came from. But yeah, I mean, it's still an amazing short.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I guess the most divisive short out of the bunch, The Rite of Spring,
Oh, really? Is it
which
divisive?
I wouldn't say divisive, but it's probably everybody's least favorite because it's a
Oh,
22-minute piece. Like it's and I know people kind of say it's the part of the film or that everybody feels really bored watching.
see,
And and in a sense, it's like, I mean, the piece they chose is incredibly amazing. Apparently, it's like the Rite of Spring itself was a huge influence on heavy metal,
yes. Yeah.
which I saw like a lot of covers, like a guitarist like doing the Rite of Spring, and it's like, wow, it's you could tell there's so much influence in the heavy metal guitars from this one piece. Could say it's the weakest, but it's still an amazing part of the film, at least in a good, interesting part in terms of like what they thought what happened at the beginning of human life at this time, and the scientists sort of diving into this part. But obviously, like Disney science is very limited at the time, so a lot of inaccurate stuff um, on how the dinosaurs were officially wiped out. But I don't know. I still think it's a good short. Like really impressive of how they managed to make it representative of what people thought how life started at that time. So
So I didn't realize this was divisive because honestly, The Rite of Spring is one of my favorite parts of this film. I've always really liked this sequence, and in a way, it holds a special place because I do think this sequence is what really helped me grow to love and appreciate Fantasia. Because I remember in my middle school music class, we learned about Stravinsky's work and we watched this sequence with the context in mind. And that really helped me, I guess, grow to appreciate and understand what Disney was doing with Fantasia. So for that reason, I have a lot of sentimental value towards it, but I still think it's an excellent sequence. It's worth noting that uh, Stravinsky was the only composer who was alive to see Fantasia first when it first came out. And for those that don't know the history of the Rite of Spring, it was a very unconventional ballet for the time to the point where people were rioting in the concert hall. And I believe it was written in like 1910. So pretty for
yeah, it was more recent
it was
one.
pretty recent. And when you think that Stravinsky's work wasn't as, I guess, popular at the time, the fact that Disney had the confidence to adapt that in this film, I think is really, really cool because if I'm not mistaken, Fantasia sort of propelled Stravinsky's work even more. So it's interesting foresight, and I think in a way, in a good way, the Rite of Spring is probably the most dated part of the film because of the science. Like this, Deems Taylor even says like, oh yeah, the dinosaurs were comparable to lizards, which now we know that they're in the offspring of like birds and stuff. But I just find it really cool that we have a visual moving medium that adapted dinosaurs in a time where the only context of dinosaurs are really just science text. So to see that come to life is like this is
Mhm.
really capturing the potential of animation, not just adapting imaginary creatures, but extinct creatures. So for that reason, it's really, I just find it an interesting artifact. I love the opening with the lava, like how it's like bubbling out of the earth. And there's that one shot where the lava mountain looks like Devil's Rock from Close Encounters. Uh,
That's awesome.
and I don't know the way they capture the dinosaurs too. Like they're in their natural habitat. You really feel the scale and weight, like when they're moving around. The T Rex sequence is really intense, but I love it. It also doesn't even the ending. It's a bleak ending. Like the dinosaurs just die, like for natural causes, and they don't sugarcoat it. It just shows like yeah, life. This is how life can be. It could just be wiped out in an instant, and yeah, like that's what happened in science. So Yeah, I've always really liked this one, and I understand why some people might think it's a bit long, but for me it flies by, and it could just be because I love the music. And who knew that Disney made their best dinosaur movie all the way back in 1940? They haven't made a better dinosaur movie since Fantasia, and they're probably not going to.
Yeah,
It's better than Dinosaur.
it's great.
Yeah, I care more about the dinosaurs here than in Dinosaur 2000, and they don't even say a word in Rite of Spring.
They don't.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so yeah, it's an amazing short. I mean, especially I know Disney has its hold pretty lightly just because of the evolution part of it. Just because
yeah, there's no
yeah,
humans.
there's no humans, so it's like I mean, the only time you really see it is when the fish is like walking out of the water. It's still like a beautifully animated sequence, and I think there are some good uses of the multi-point camera, especially when they're going through the forest. And yeah,
Hmm.
it's a really gorgeously made piece. So yeah, but yeah, don't have too much else to say about, but it's still good. Yeah, then we kind of jump into like the intermission part of it, and I guess the thing
Meet the
I
soundtrack.
yeah, the soundtrack. I mean, I guess I forgot to mention that there are bits of humor sprinkled throughout. I think before the Rite of Spring sequence, there was a point where one of the percussionists drops one of the chimes on the ground, which
Oh
actually,
yeah.
yeah, which is actually pretty fitting. Like it didn't feel out of place, and they introduced the soundtrack, which it's a cute little piece. It's kind of
Hmm.
nice use of like how they showed the audio waveform in some way. Very humorous, but also like, watching how like the sound waves sort of just have their own character to them is amazing in that regard. But yeah, I really enjoyed that part. And I guess we get to some sort of the most controversial part of the film, which I guess they did remove, luckily. And this is the pastoral symphony sequence, where
Hmm.
instead of using the countryside that Beethoven based his music off of, they used Greek mythology, which honestly I think that was a very good fit.
It's really clever. It fits really well.
Yeah, it's a good fit. I actually do like. I think probably some of my favorite orchestrations are in this sequence, especially like the strings and near the end of the sequence as well is amazing. And like my God, there's just so many beautiful shots of just the scenery in this sequence. It's quite amazing. But, there was a controversial part of the film that was cut out of the subsequent releases of this film, because, there were, racial stuff that happened in these shorts where they used
Hmm.
to have, the black, centaurs sort of tending to
Yeah,
the, female centaurs, or as, they refer to them in the film, centaurettes. I'm honestly glad they did cut it out
yeah. It
because
doesn't add anything.
yeah, it really didn't. I think they were trying to add in some humor to it, and and I did manage to catch some few glimpses of the original parts
Yeah,
of it, which, Disney, like Song of the South, tries to keep removing them from the internet, but people somehow find a way to bring them back in. Yeah, these were very, controversial parts of the film that I'm glad they cut out, just because they're pretty offensive, and I don't think they really added much to the sequence. So when they removed them, it's like, yeah, I'm pretty glad they did.
yeah. It's interesting too how from a technical standpoint how they remove the character because there's two things. So in the print that you see on Disney Plus, which is the 2000s restoration, they just digitally remove the character and pretty seamlessly. Honestly, like if you didn't know it was there, like you would have never guessed. There's the one shot of the carpet rolling out where the carpet just rolls on its own. That was the I think the character's name was Sunflower, if I'm not mistaken. The racially insensitive one.
Mhm,
It was rolled out by her, basically.
mhm.
And then there's some shots where they just zoom in and crop it. But a few months ago, I actually saw Fantasia on a 35 millimeter print. It was the print from, I think, 1990, which was the 50th anniversary. This was before they had those digital tools. And in that scene with the carpet, they just zoomed in onto the Bacchus character, and the framing was really awkward. And in my head, I knew, like, okay, that's where Sunflower was. But it was that one you could tell they're hiding something. Whereas here, in the 2000s they were able to remove it more naturally. Even then, still, like without the racial stereotype character, the Centaurettes are bare-breasted, like
Hmm.
which is that's still around, which I'm kind of surprised, especially during the Hayes Code. Or I guess it's not like
Yeah, yeah, they
they're not
don't.
overly detailed, but
Yeah, yeah,
still,
they
it's
don't
kind of
show.
surprising to see.
They used to be like really bare-breasted, and then the Hayes office, like told them that they had to like put garlands around them or whatever. Just because the Hayes.
No, but there's parts in when they introduce the Centaurettes, they don't have the garlands over.
Yeah, that is true. So they must. I'm pretty much sure, like through restoration, they probably had to add a few of those in. But it is still
Maybe.
insane they managed to get a lot of this past the Hayes Code, and it is
Yeah.
still it's still like a very captivating sequence.
Yeah.
But
I will say, like, I really love the use of color in this sequence particularly. It looks really beautiful, and there's some good comedy. Like, I love when the way like Bacchus moves. Like, he's a bit of a bigger character, and he's drunk off the wine, and he's smiling, he's having a great time. That's a lot of fun. But I gotta say, this is probably my least favorite of all the sequences. I think this one drags personally. Like, when they introduce the Centaurettes, like, it really, really slows down, and then the tension just kind of accelerates with Zeus throwing the lightning, and then, oh wait, it's all good, like we're all chill, and it just kind of ends. I'm like, I don't know. The music is nice, but I don't know. The pacing isn't great. I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a really awkward use of reuse. Well, there's two really awkward things about this film from a technical animation standpoint. There's a shot of one of the Centaurettes who walks out and sort of like kind of leans her head over, like trying to look pretty, and they repeat the same shot twice within 3 seconds. I don't know if they were trying to, if they covered something up in the edit, but it was reused animation in quick succession, which was a little odd.
yeah, I'm,
And
I'm
then,
pretty
do
sure it was like.
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about because I noticed, and it's like, yeah, it's probably another part where they cut off one of the black Centaurettes, because
That's true.
there were two of them in the film. One was with the Bacchus character, and the other was with the Centaurettes.
Yeah. And then there's one shot near the end with like this a male centaur and then one of the centaurettes and the cupid sort of sleeping, and it's a back it's clearly a background, but they look almost porcelain. It's a really weird shot because it's so out of place, and I don't understand why it was there. Like, it looks off for some
Yeah,
reason.
I didn't.
That shot always kind of distracted me.
I guess I didn't
But
mind it too much because I mean it because even with like the fact that it is out of place, it's so gorgeous looking shot. I think,
that's true.
and it's like it kind of like makes it look like they were sort of like marbleized, which sounds weird, but like looks like one of those marble statues you would see at a museum somewhere. Like it's really gorgeous. Like I mean, I really love that shot, and like I said, like Stokowski's orchestrations just really work super effectively in this film, in this part of the sequence, because I think that's where you get much more of the heavy strings here, especially the part where Diana the archer's like shooting the arrow through the sky, and it's
Yeah.
just like, wow, it's just so gorgeous. And then when the sun is just setting as like the strings are going down, it's just like it's so perfectly in sync. Like it's amazing how well they managed to do everything. So, but yeah, any other thoughts on Pastoral?
I still like it. Like, there's not a single bad sequence here, but I think if there was one that if I were just watching it, just sort of in passing or just kind of like half paying attention, I would probably skip through Pastoral Symphony because there's only like a few parts that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Um,
I'm the opposite. I mean,
yeah.
I love it. Although, like, yeah, I'm glad they got rid of the, obviously the really offensive stereotypes in it. But I think that's pretty
Yeah.
much the last of those, at least in this film. All right, Dance
Yeah.
of the Hours. This one's obviously the much more comedic one. Maybe next to Sorcerer's
I think
Apprentice
this
a
one's
little bit.
hilarious.
Which obviously what they're just doing is they're just replacing the ballerinas in the opera. But yeah, it's they replace them with hippos, ostriches, and alligators, which and
Yeah.
elephants. Like, yeah, it's just a parade of circus animals. Which, yeah, it's funny. It's a very funny short.
Yeah.
Not the most ambitious in terms of animation, but it is still a really
Oh,
impressive parody on that one. But
I almost disagree. I think this one really, from an animation standpoint, yeah, it doesn't have the awe-inspiring atmosphere of the next sequence we'll talk about, but it excels on the character animation. Like there's so much life and motion in these animals, and I think the whole film Fantasia is arguably a pastiche. Like it's aware of what it is in terms of this. We're putting classical music alongside animation, but this one really, really emphasizes the parody and the positive farce. Like it starts with the curtain opening, and then plays with your expectations. Like, oh, we got these goofy animals, but they're gonna be dancing to the music of the ballet, which is seen as this like highbrow, sophisticated artistic experience, and it's really really funny. Like I love it for that reason, and this one grew on me more because I would always skip this one as a kid, but as I got older, I'm just like, nah, this is great. This is actually awesome, and I love how each animal, like if they're bigger ones, they move like with more weight. The alligators are more like lanky and skinny. They move faster, and they're like eyes wide shut cloaks.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
no, it's great. Yeah, and it's goofy, but it's not insulting. Like it doesn't talk down to you. Like it still feels like an appropriate part of this program. So
Oh yeah, it
yeah,
does, and
um,
how they represent the times of day pretty well. The different animals works very well. I mean, I do like the background work on it, and and
mhm.
also like how once the it's alligators or crocodiles. It's one of the species, I believe.
I think they're alligators.
Alligators. Yeah, but, I do like how once they kinda pop in, it's like you kinda get this very stark black background, and that sort of makes the characters stand out a little bit more. And, I also sort of like the use of, like, drums because obviously it's, hippos and elephants are very big, so whenever, like, they're like, when one of them, like, lands on top of the alligator, it's like you hear the timpani just, like, boom, it's like and that wasn't, like, in the I don't know if that's, like, in the original ballet, but it's still rather impressive, like, how they just add that one little effect just for comedic levity. But, yeah, it's an awesome piece. I mean, it's not it's not the most ambitious, but it's like, it's still, like, amazing on how it's well made and, very impressed with it.
It's like a Looney Tunes cartoon minus the slapstick. It's probably a good way to
Mhm.
describe it. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Um,
Most definitely.
yeah,
Alright. Now it's probably time to get to definitely the best of the segments
yeah,
here,
I'd agree.
which says a lot because there are a lot of really good ones here. But that's The Night on Bald Mountain and Ave Maria. What else is there really to say about this short? It's it's
I am
something
amazed that they got away with this with
y
Ball Mountain. It's insane.
yeah, like,
Like,
it's insane. I really impressed. I mean, just the design of Chernenbog is incredible. I mean, because obviously they based him off of, Bela Lugosi's,
yeah,
facial features, but the music is so fitting. Just the use of the animation here, you see many styles mixed in, like, you could swear they were, like, some of these especially the shots of, like, the ghosts coming out of the tombstones or whatever, or, the graveyard, it's like you could swear that was digitally put in, but it wasn't. It's
hmm
really impressive. I think it's the same effect that they used, like you mentioned with the, Nutcracker Suite, where they sort of, like,
that makes
superimpose
sense.
the
Yeah.
characters on top of the backgrounds, and that is really impressive. Like, man, you can't really go wrong with this sequence. It's just everything just hits so right with The Night on Bald Mountain and Ave Maria.
Yeah, no, this sequence was directed by Wilfred Jackson, who did a lot of the really great atmospheric Disney shorts. He also co-directed the Old Mill Silly Symphony, which is also one of the best things Disney has ever done. Um, but I love how just right from the start, this sequence pulls no punches. Like it's dark, it's sinister, it's bleak, it's intense. There's no joy, there's no fun. It's like the perfect visual illustration of hell, I would say. Like and Chernobog, spectacular performance, performance presence. The eyes glowing are just like still give me chills, and it all really feels like a nightmare come to life. And this is one where you can tell that the title of the score of the piece itself really influenced the animation. That and like Sorcerer's Apprentice, because like everything else is rather interpreted in a way that was probably opposite of what the original composer intended. Whereas this one's like, I don't know how else you would do this. Honestly, you can't tell the Night on Bald Mountain in the aesthetic of the Pastoral Symphony, for example. Like that contrast doesn't work. So yeah, this one also has more bare-breasted characters, like those flying creatures that come towards the camera. It was like that was
Yeah,
shocking.
it's crazy. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure like there was a blink and you'll miss it moment. So like, the Hays Code probably didn't really think too much of it or something.
yeah. You couldn't pause a film back
No, you
then,
couldn't. It's like,
so
oh, I guess we got to rewind the projection reel here. But yeah, I mean, it's an amazing sequence. I mean, it's just sort of just
got the
how,
shadows
and then the
too.
contrast between both Night on Bald Mountain and Ave Maria is just such a good contrast. I mean, you don't have to be a particularly, religious person to watch this, because I mean, yeah, it does have a lot of heavy, Christianity theming around it, but it's still like it's gorgeous. Like
Hmm.
really, really gorgeous here. I mean, I think just the way Night on Bald Mountain ends and just the way Ave Maria just sort of continues on this, this whole atmospheric part of the film is just incredible. And it's so simple, like just the simple animation choices in the Ave Maria part of it, and just using the multiplane camera just to pan across the entire like setting, and then just ending with that beautiful zoom in over the mountain. Like that is just peak. Like I get teary eyed a lot during that part of the film. Like it's just so awe-inspiring to
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, the pairing of these two sequences is probably the most effective use of like good triumphing over evil probably ever done
Mhm.
in animation. And like some people say like, oh, Fantasia has no structure, it's just a bunch of shorts. Like no, that this ending sequence is my rebuttal where it's like there is structure here. There is clear you are clearly getting an emotional feeling out of just the pairings of the music and like God, the tracking shots of like the monks walking through the forest, which is all like unbroken, and then the slow zoom towards the sunrise is just utterly perfection. And it borders on a spiritual experience, I would say, even if you're not a spiritual person, like you just can't help but feel like the weight and gravitas of the music of the chorus. And you couldn't ask for a more perfect ending. Like there's a method to how these sequences were all paired, and not it would just not have the same impact if you didn't have Night on Bald Mountain and Ave Maria capping it off. And like when it's done, you're just like, wow, it really manages to embrace the power of the film language in a way that I don't think any other film has really done. Like,
Yeah,
and especially if you ever get the chance, just to anyone that's listening, you got to see Fantasia in a theater at least once. Like I was fortunate to see it twice last year in New York because it was playing at some rep theaters. But if it ever comes to a independent or an art house theater playing it at a rep screening, you got to check it out. Like, because one, the sound, but the impact hits a lot harder, especially with this end sequence. So,
yeah, it's
yeah.
gorgeous. And fun fact about the end sequence. So apparently, this is one of the harder scenes to shoot. Oddly enough, at least with the panning into the
Oh, I
sunlight.
believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, because apparently they had to reshoot it 4 times, and, obviously, it brought up the budget too when they kept doing that, and apparently during the 3rd reshoot, there was actually a minor earthquake, that
Oh my God,
apparently, like,
really?
while they were panning in, like, shook the glass, and this is the editor and me, like, knowing about deadlines, but they had to shoot it a 4th time, and they completed it a day before the film premiered. And they had to
Wow.
like really. put the finished film in a reel after they finished and flew it all the way to New York on a charter plane, and and had to splice it, and it's like they had, and it was 4 hours before the film started. So sort of like a
Wow,
situation with what
that's incredible.
happened to Josh Safdie with Marty Supremer.
I
He
was
literally
thinking the
brought
same
the
thing.
film
Yeah.
to New York Film Festival right as he finished it. Like that is, I mean, the amount of stress that you had to go through just trying to get that one sequence perfect before it premiered.
Yeah.
Like,
And this is obviously pre-digital. Everything's analog. So
yeah, so in that, and
like if
the
you mess up,
budget's
you got to
higher.
redo it again.
It's a really good end to like probably one of the most beautiful and captivating films ever made. What else could you really say, honestly? Mm.
There really isn't much else to say. Like it's literally a perfect ending. There are no flaws. So
We'll kind of tap on this a little bit because obviously time's getting short, but this is an interesting part of Disney's overall film catalog. And I go back to that Tim Brayton Letterboxd review, saying that this was probably a point where, once this film failed, Disney did sort of start to pivot into more commercial work, which is, like Dumbo came after it. And, they were working on Bambi a little bit after that. But then after that point, World War II hit, and then, they started to go into films that, I wouldn't say are bad. Like, obviously there's a lot of value to like the films that came afterward, and especially those in the Disney Renaissance. But Disney seemed to pivot more toward the more commercial side post Fantasia. Which isn't to say that the stuff they released since Fantasia hasn't been artistically pleasing, because of course, Beauty and the Beast exists, and they still have a couple of short films that, managed to be super successful. Would you say, like, if World War II didn't happen, would Disney still go with something like Fantasia in the near future?
I think about that as one of the biggest what ifs for the Disney company. I still think even if World War II hadn't happened, this would have been a hard sell regardless. However, I do believe that just by the nature of the world not being at war, more people would have seen it and would have respected it, I guess, right out of the gate. And I think inevitably Disney would come to realize that this concept probably wouldn't be as financially viable as the standard Disney narrative. So I, in my opinion, regardless of the times of when Fantasia came out, they would have inevitably pivoted towards the standard Disney formula eventually. However, there probably would have been a place for Fantasia like films because they were planning to do like a sequel. Or I think Disney's original plan was we're gonna like update the program basically with new pieces and animation. One of them, the Claire de Lune scene. Claire de Lune was originally part of the Fantasia program, but they cut it I think for time, and that animation was part of Make My Music with a different score. And then later on, they released the original Claire de Lune track, and it fits better.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think there would have been they probably would have existed more concurrent, like in tandem with each other. But inevitably, I believe there would have the classic 3 act structure would have prevailed. So
Yeah, and it's difficult because I mean, the more I think time goes on, the more I sort of see like Fantasia being that lightning in a bottle for the
yeah,
Disney company. And, it's not like they've been trying to make other attempts at it, because obviously Fantasia 2000 came out, and apparently that was like one of the first IMAX film releases too, which not a lot of people know that. And there have been more ideas, but with Fantasia, like I think they tried with the Little Match Girl, and they tried to do some more shorts like that, to put into another Fantasia film, but obviously they ended up just releasing them as their own shorts at the end of the day. So I guess like part of me is like, wants to see more stuff like Fantasia in the future. And I'll happily go see it if they ever do that. I don't know if we really need to, because this film, was so monumental in every way, and has impacted it, that you can't really take away the experience of it, and you can
no,
recreate it all you want, and you can do what you can with that, but I think it's more of a case where, recently watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, like I said in the last review, and I think I didn't mention it a little bit in my Letterboxd review for Fantasia 2000, where they tried to do a sequel to 2001. And the thing about that is, like, although it's still a well-made film in that regard, it's like they can't replicate what the first film did. Because it's such a lightning in a bottle experience, you can't really do that, unfortunately, because, it's something that was so monumental and so ambitious, and all you're doing is trying to emulate something that can't be emulated. And you could be inspired by it, pay homage to it, but it's really recreate this film.
I kind of agree with that because I like Fantasia 2000. I don't think it's a bad film at all. It's actually for the time, it's pretty solid. But you can tell that there was still there there was a different headspace when they made Fantasia 2000. Like we have to live up to this, and it felt more corporatized. I felt like some of it felt like a not great imitation of Fantasia, whereas the original film was made at a time where he was basically on his A game. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what he wanted to do in terms of pairing classical music with animation and really using it as a showcase of like this is what we could do. It's almost like a parallel to what would eventually become the Epcot project. He wanted to use the Epcot project to sort of showcase like the standard like community projects, like potentially looking into the future of like what can be done with this concept. He did the same with Fantasia for film and animation, and unfortunately, just the other shoe just didn't drop where we saw more of that bold experimentation. So
I think regardless of that, I think it's still a revolutionary piece of filmmaking, and it's probably going to be a film that I don't think we're ever going to see again in this lifetime. I mean, you could see people emulating it, and it still influences a lot of animation today. I mean, I think there's some parts of Spider Verse that do sync up with animation in the way that, Fantasia
mm-hmm.
did, and yeah, it just shows that, like animation's not a genre, it's a medium. I mean, people gotta realize that it's like, these aren't films that always aim for the family demographic in any way. Otherwise you wouldn't have like stuff like Family Guy or whatever.
Yeah,
But where, animation is filmmaking. It's a part of filmmaking, and it's gonna be that way till the end of time. And, I think Fantasia is proof of the fact that that mentality of it being a medium, not a genre, has always existed. It's just that, I think, corporations have taken that idea the wrong way. And, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy that, that mentality is, being more brought forward, especially if more ambitious films from other studios coming out, like Studio Ghibli is still cranking out some good stuff with, Miyazaki sort of going in and out of retirement. And like I said, the Spider-Verse films are, doing phenomenally well in that regard. And of course, last year's Flow is also a good example. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy that, we only got like one Fantasia, and I'm glad that, it's something where, if you think animation's just, kid shit, it's like, no, it's not. Look at Fantasia. It's definitely not just for
yeah.
kids.
It in
So,
a way, I as much as I would have a part of me is like I wish Disney did more of this, but also it's almost a bit of a blessing in disguise that there wasn't really anything else like Fantasia because it stands out as something even more special. Like the fact that it's this
mm,
one of a kind is like, oh, you were really doing something incredible that could really not be replicated or duplicated in a similar manner. So I always respect it for that regard. And I don't know. Maybe it's better that he didn't do more of this because it probably would have cheapened it. He probably would have been micromanaged, or so the corporate side of it would like sort of poison the well, I guess so to say. Like he just made something so
mhm,
pure and unique. So yeah,
yeah,
maybe for the better. It's better that there weren't any more Fantasia films in this era. So
yeah. All right. It's final thoughts.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's a genuine masterpiece. Like there's not even among films that I would say are superior to Fantasia, there isn't one that really, in my opinion, exemplifies the power of the cinematic medium as this film does. Like it really just goes shoots for the moon in terms of replicating the visual splendor of animation, the power of music, and combining that into something that only you could only do with film. You couldn't do this with just a singular painting or by just listening to the soundtrack. It has to be done through this film medium. And for that reason, I absolutely love it. I love it more every time I see it. It is Disney's never going to make anything like this again. And I don't think they're ever going to make a film that surpasses Fantasia. They haven't in over 80 years, and I don't see them doing that anytime soon. So it's easy 10 out of 10.
Yeah, same. I mean, to me, this is the ultimate film experience. I don't think it can ever be topped. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of great films that have come out in the modern era of filmmaking that, are still incredible. I mean, you got your La La Lands, you got your One Battle After Another's, you have a lot of great stuff that has come out in recent years that have, really pushed the film medium forward. But I think and I mean, I think with Fantasia, it's just like it's something that stands on its own level. There's nothing truly like it and never will be like it. It can be emulated, but can't be imitated. And it's something that, is such a special film to me. It's special film to animation. And, as much as, I start to get more apathetic toward the Disney company, which, hopefully has a brighter future ahead with Josh D'Amaro
Oh, yeah.
being the new CEO in the coming months. Until Disney can, get back to making the quality content that they do, I can't really see myself like continuing to like, support them in this way. But, hopefully they can continue that. But I mean, Fantasia is just something in that filmography and their whole film history, film library that is truly monumental, not just for animation, but for filmmaking. And there's a reason why it's my all-time favorite. There's a reason why it's on the top of that list. I mean, yeah, sure, I like Citizen Kane too, and I mean, I like a lot of other, historical films, but Fantasia is just one of those films that is always going to hold a special spot in my heart, and it's something that is truly can't be replicated. It's perfect. I mean, what else can you say about it? So yeah, obviously 10 out of 10. So
Nice.
all right. It's my
So
turn
your
to go, correct?
recommendation now. Yeah, your first one.
Yeah, my first one. So in years past, I know we sort of talked about this filmmaker and on banter, and I know it's filmmaker you're audibly like about, but you're not like you haven't watched much of this guy's work. And for me, I mean, this guy had the same, I don't know, the same story as Paul Thomas Anderson, but sort of is an influence in the independent film market in a lot of ways. And he's been rather successful, and that is Steven Soderbergh. Now, in
Oh.
terms of what films I kind of been tossing it around on what films I want us to watch. And obviously we have to leave it at one. I mean, I thought about Sex Lies and Videotape, which, great film. Um, no, it wouldn't be about introduction to it's kind of like Out of Sight is also another great one with George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. Actually, Jennifer Lopez is one of her very few good performances. Um, but I would kind of thought, why not go for the one that practically made him an icon in the early 2000s and probably one of the greatest heist films ever made, and that is going to be Ocean's 11.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
That's good. I've never seen it.
yeah, I mean,
So,
I think you'll like it. I hope you'll like it. I mean, I think it's a good introduction to Steven Soderbergh's style of filmmaking, and you know, I think it's genuinely one of the best heist films I've ever seen in my life, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So
Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, awesome. If you want to listen to the next episode and hear us talk about Ocean's 11, go watch Ocean's 11, and of course, Fantasia for that matter. And maybe a slight recommendation on Send Help too. But yeah, that's gonna be it. We recently did some social media going, so those will be
Hmm.
at the link in the description. And of course, we are now established on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So till next time, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.
Bye.